motors. It's now my immense pleasure to introduce our next speakers, a dialogue by Irma Boom and Alice Rawsthorn. Irma is an Amsterdam-based graphic designer specialized in making books, in making the most wonderful books in the world. She worked on SHV Think Book from 96 onwards, commissioned by SHV Holding in Utrecht, has done many more of the most wonderful museum catalogs, artist catalogs, architect catalogs, has actually designed a wonderful book for the Serpentine Gallery, the Herzog de Meuron Ai Weiwei book, the Rijksmuseum, Inside Outside, MoMA, which are international, NIE publishers, United Nations, Aga Khan Foundation, Yale Press, Barth Graduate Center, Tate Modern. It's a very long list. We have to congratulate Irma, because in 2014, in a row, she won 2 important awards, the Gutenberg Prize and the Johannes Vermeer Award for her extraordinary oeuvre. Irma will be in conversation with Alice Rawsthorn. There is no marathon without Alice. Alice is our extraordinary advisor to everything related to design and more in relation to the marathon. She is the author of a wonderful column in Freeze magazine, many more columns, International New York Times, many other magazines, and of course her book, Hello World. That's another urgent book for your book list. The book list Cornelia Parker started yesterday, Hello World, Where Design Meets Life, which explores design's influence on our life, past, present, and future. Alice is also a trustee of the Whitechapel Gallery, also the contemporary dance group Michael Clark Company, as well as the chair of trustees of the Chisenhale Gallery in London. Alice has been advisor to many marathons. The Garden Marathon in 2011, where she interviewed the Field Club and Something and Son. The Memory Marathon, in which she talked about design and memory, about the Eric Hobsbawmian protest against forgetting in relation to design, and was also the author of our catalogue of the Martino Gamper exhibition, which happened here at the Serpentine Sackler Gallery. Irma and Alice will engage today in a discussion about the book, A Case of Survival. So it is, I suppose, a protest against the extinction of the book. Please give a very warm welcome to Irma Boom and Alice Rawsthorn.
Well, thank you, Hans-Ulrich, and to Julia, too, for inviting us to be here today. And I should say, in the interest of clarity, that I'm Alice, tempted though I am to pretend I'm a prize-winning book designer, and this is Irma. So, the book, or rather the printed book, Can It Survive? Now, throughout the centuries, objects have come and gone from daily life, because in design's version of the Darwinian process of natural selection, once ubiquitous, even essential objects have been replaced with things that are more efficient, more resilient, more versatile, more seductive, and more sustainable. Yet few periods of history have seen quite so many familiar objects disappear as in this one. And the reason, as we discussed at the Serpentine Memory Marathon 2 years ago, is the ever-increasing power of the transistor, which enables tiny digital devices like smartphones and tablets to fulfill the functions of hundreds, if not thousands, of once essential individual objects. And anything whose function can be executed as or more efficiently by such a device is at risk of extinction. And some things have, of course, already gone. Record players, video cassettes, cassette tapes, Walkman, and many more objects are about to join them. Why would you need a pocket calculator when you've got a calculating app on your phone, an alarm clock, or a wristwatch like this one, which, despite Apple's best efforts, will soon age me as accurately as my wrinkles? So in this session, Irma and I are going to discuss whether one object on the endangered list can avoid extinction, the printed book, because as Julia said, when so many things are threatened with extinction, we have to be very careful about the things we choose to save. Now, the printed book, like this one, is one of the most culturally imposing objects in history. Many of the books that many people read are, of course, not imposing at all. They're flashy, trashy cyber thrillers, they're bonkbusters, Argus sagas, bodice rippers, sex and shopping novels, or deluded get-rich-quick guides, or full of dieting tips. But even so, a printed book like this one And this is Hans-Ulrich's latest book, Ways of Curating. If you haven't read it, I'd urge you to do so. It's wonderful, and I can honestly say he neither threatened nor bribed me to say that. But for a printed book like this one, it's steeped in culture, in civilization, learning, enlightenment, decency, and progress. So many of the things that we hold dear and want to hold on to. Destroying books is rightly derided as a heinous crime, and the burning of books conjures images of truly evil and hideous tyrants. Yet the single most important element of any book, not just this one, is of course its content. It's the words and perhaps the images that it delivers to us. Because as an object, the book is a container. It's a supremely sophisticated form of packaging, which has fulfilled that function perfectly well for a very long time. So in a book like this, we can see that the cover protects the contents. There's an expressive element in the jacket and the choice of typeface, and it's reasonably compact and light, so I can fairly comfortably carry it around with me. In other words, it's a fairly well-designed object which is fit for purpose. But even so, as soon as a new medium emerges that delivers the contents of that book more efficiently than it does, the object is imperiled, and rightly so. And that is precisely what has happened in recent years, because compared to their digital equivalents, traditional books like this are bulky, heavy, inflexible, and environmentally wasteful. You don't have to pulp trees to produce digital books, use toxic ink, or burn sorely needed fossil fuel to transport them. They don't gather dust and take up space on bookshelves, and you can carry lots of them around with you wherever you go on your iPad or your tablet. They're also much more versatile. If you have bad eyesight, you can change the size of the font to suit you so it's easier to read, and it's very easy to check instantly the meaning of a word or a reference, because of course you can zip onto the internet, which is the biggest single reference library that anybody could ever have dreamt of. So in that context, even to a bookworm like me, who owes so many of the things that she cherishes and values to printed books, their prognosis seems pretty bleak, which is why when Hans-Ulrich and Julia invited me to participate in the Extinction Marathon, I chose to ask the person who I believe has created many of the most beautiful, eloquent, and ingenious printed books of our time, and that is Irma, to discuss whether her chosen medium can survive extinction, and if so, how. And I should explain that all the images of the books you see on the screen are books designed and made by Irma over the years, and you're actually seeing an animation of this amazing little thing, one, I think, the smallest printed book I own. It's called Boom, or as Hans-Ulrich would say, Boom, The Architecture of the Book, and it is Irma's book about the making of her own book, so you can have a preview of it there. So, Irma, first of all, how did you discover book design? Because originally you studied art, I think.
Yes, I wanted to become a painter. And but I found out I was not good enough, and there were many. My big examples are Ellsworth Kelly or Daniel Burin or Daan van Golde in the Netherlands, and I found out I cannot. I'm not as good. So, and then I was traveling through the school. It was a very liberal art school, and there was this person, this teacher, who would bring books like I now always bring books, and would not talk about the form and the content. So he would recite Apollinaire, or he would explain the whole book as an object and content-wise. And I fell in love, and I stayed there. Yeah.
And why are you still in love with printed books? Because you have devoted your career, your working life, to them. So what particular qualities do they have that have enabled you to do that and inspired you to do that?
I must say I feel a bit like a dinosaur. If I attend conferences all over the world, I'm always the person carrying my suitcase with the real books, because I think a PDF doesn't do it. It's here you don't see size or weight or paper or any intimacy. And for me, making a book, and I think the Sheila Hicks book is quite a good example for it, is that a book still, and I'm not sure how long, but still has a value. It's a sort of container, as you mentioned, but it's a filtered container. So if you make a book, then you put other stuff in a book, I think, than on a website. A website you just dump there, it's flux. You can change it immediately.
So if we look at this book in particular, I should begin by explaining that many of you will know Sheila Hicks is a really wonderful American artist and textile designer, now based in Paris. And this book accompanied an exhibition of her work in the United States some years ago. So can you explain, first of all, why you designed this book in the way that you did? I mean, it's incredibly textured for a start. So what its particular qualities are and how that reflects the content.
It first starts, do you want to make a book for this artist? That's for me the first question, because if you make a book, it's extremely time-consuming, and as you said, you use paper, binding, a lot of people are involved to get it the way you want. And when talking to Sheila, I found out she studied at Yale, and I'm a teacher at Yale. And so we had, talking to her, I found out she was an extreme, or is, she's still alive, an extremely interesting lady. And she gave me a text by Arthur Danto, Weaving as Metaphor and Model for Political Thought. That's what she gave me on the train back from Paris to Amsterdam. And so when I read the text, I thought, well, it is interesting to make a book about weaving, because she's a weaving artist. And but to be honest, I'm not really interested in this kind of work, but I'm interested in the person, and I thought I want to spend time with this person to make a book for her. And I was also looking her up on the internet, and there was lots of work to see. But anyway, I thought to make a book and make a sort of filter of what she has done, because she was 74 when I started working with her, to make a sort of filter her work down to 100 pieces, and that's this book.
So can you explain some of the design decisions? If we hold it like this so everybody can see it. First of all, there is a lot of texture. It's an incredibly tactile object, particularly at the edges of the pages, which are very, very rough hewn. And also on the cover, where you have this textured white cover, which I presume most commercial publishers would screen because it would get dirty.
Well,
so why both those facets?
So it's published by Yale Press London. I had a huge fight with a white cover, because they said, well, if you work with an artist who makes such a colorful work, why would you make a cover which is white? But I thought that Sheila Hicks, although she was present on the internet, I thought she needs a book where not only in textile interested persons would pick up the book, because that's what you have to do. You have to pick it up and see it in the store. And yeah, why would you, only these 100 people interested in textile art would pick it up? I thought the book as an object, as it is, so this white, sort of strange object. I think that was much more interesting for her to make this white book, intriguing object, because I thought then a lot of people, not only textile people, would pick up the book, and she will get a larger audience. And nobody believed me, nobody. So I worked 4 years on this book, and 1 year I even stopped working on it, because they said, you're crazy to make a white book for a person who makes this colorful work, and then these crazy edges. Why would you, for God's sake, make these crazy edges? But that's for me a sort of color of image rhyme with her work. It's the selvage which is important, and the edge of the book is also the selvage. And the book became an extremely success. So that was not what we all could anticipate, but it was not only a successful book, but the artist Sheila Hicks had a, how do you say that, a renaissance,
she did,
exactly.
Which she continues to enjoy.
Yeah.
And another idiosyncrasy of the book is that the typeface changes size throughout it. In Arthur Danto's essay, you can probably find it.
Yes, of course. And
it begins very big and then progressively becomes smaller.
Yes.
Why was that?
For me, I don't know if you can see it, but for me it was important. I was so impressed by this text by Danto about the culture of weaving and how weaving is important for like we almost saw this in the film, The Seed of Time, that weaving is a part of culture. And I thought everybody should read it to understand the work of Sheila Hicks. So I thought I'll make it really big. And while you turn the pages, the text becomes smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And at that time you are in the text, into the reading. And at some point the type reaches point 12 and then you're into the book. But this was a big thing because here in London they said at Yale Press, you cannot play with text. That's really, Arthur Danto is very important art critic, and you cannot simply play with his text. And then I said, well, is he still alive? And then they said, yes, well, why don't we ask him instead of having assumptions for somebody else? So let's ask Arthur Danto. And he said it was brilliant. So, so they couldn't say no anymore.
Good for him. And so changing to a different scale, this tiny book, the book of Irma's own work, Boom, why did you make a book which is little sort of higher and wider than a postage stamp?
It's basically because when I make a book like this, or even the book I made, this is 25 years ago, I always make small books, because small books...
This is right at the beginning of the design process.
Yes, right at the beginning of the process I make these small models, because I'm always afraid to do something wrong. So if it's small scale, I'm less... how do you say it? It's less frightening. Yes, exactly, that's the word. And so I make these models, but also to see the distribution of text and image. It's much easier to see, like an architect who makes a model of his building. This is a model of a book. And it's exactly the same idea behind it.
And one of the joys of going to Irma's studio in Amsterdam is that it is full of these tiny baby books. But again, I mean, how did the publishers feel? I mean, the text is absolutely tiny. If I read this in poor light, I do actually need a magnifying glass.
Yeah, but that's what you said, that the young people now, they all want to have big type books because they are so used to enlarge. And so this is, it might be a problem, but I think you think this is a tiny book, but there are books like this. I should have brought it. They are made, I think, in the 50s, and that's not a problem at all. It's really because of iPads, iPhones, and enlarging that it might be not readable, but I think it's very legible. Yeah.
It is, and today I can read it
clearly
in twilight with slightly more difficulty. So you have made a wonderful case for the printed book as an object that has a tactility, which obviously the digital eludes the digital book, and so a much broader sensuality. So is your argument that a beautifully designed book can engage the reader in a sensory way that a digital book cannot?
I think that the Sheila Hicks book proved that, and also another book which Hans also mentioned, the SHV book. That's a very fat book I made I started to make in 1991. It was right at the beginning of email and internet. And so we decided not to make a DVD or something online, because it was at the very beginning, because if something develops very quickly, then it's the internet stuff and all these devices. Imagine if we had made for that company, on the project we worked on for 5 years, if we had made a DVD or CD-ROM, I think it was called at that time. Nobody knew anymore about that project, but because of this huge book we made with more than 2,000 pages, it's still a thing that somebody wants to have a look at and comes back to. So I think that there is a way to that the book can still survive. And on the other hand, I don't think that the book needs any defense from me or from anybody, because text in a specific way changes all the time. It changes all the time. And the book, the filter of content, I think there is, and also the intimacy a book has. I think, but maybe I always, when I say it, I feel very nostalgic, but I think there is is a future for the book.
So, having accepted that,
Yeah.
do you also feel there's a meaningful role for the digital book? You've made the case for the printed book very
yes.
eloquently.
Yeah.
So, in what circumstances do you feel a digital book actually is a more appropriate medium?
I think for literature, but then on the other hand, I think the literature covers, the book covers are such an important part of culture, but like you said, like an LP cover, but I think literature or atlases or dictionaries all should go there. But I'm really for the printed book, because I think it serves another goal. And I'm very much against expensive books. All the books I have here with me are not expensive books. I'm for the democracy of the book. So I think that there is still a sort of, how do you say that? Role and value for the printed book. Maybe it will become less because that's obvious, but I still think there is, and even with the money I get for the price of the Vermeer Prize, which is 100,000 euros, I will start a library. And that's also like a book, it's an edited version of what you have in the world. Like internet is there's so much information, but if you bring it back to a book, this container, like I did with Rem Koolhaas, the 2 books for the biennial now in Venice. I think if you look at elements of architecture, it's so much information, a lot of information you find on the internet, but to bring it back to this container book, I think makes it much more accessible, and maybe you go back to internet, but it makes it very accessible for a specific group of people.
So, as a final question, because you have made the case for the printed book's survival beautifully.
But I'm not defending it, not at all.
Well, when it merits defence, it should be stoutly defended. And I am an unashamed lover of the printed book. I also love digital books too, in their particular roles. My worry for the printed book is the parallel of the LP, the record cover, in that we still see beautifully designed album covers, but because they have become an objet d'art in a way, a sort of, they tend to be expensive, fairly elitist, limited edition, almost cult item, I don't feel that they can have the same cultural currency they had before, when, if you think of the 70s or the 80s, even the early 90s, one, whether it was Patti Smith's Horses or Nirvana's Nevermind, there were in utero, one single image could have a lightning effect on a generation. And books did have that. Penguin paperbacks in the 1940s when Jan Tischelt designed them, Germano Fascetti's beautiful Penguin Modern Poetry series in the 60s, even Bruce Mauer's own books in the 90s, they all speak to their times. Do you believe the printed book can continue to do that?
I think so, because it does already 500 years, so why not another 500 years? I think that's the book made the point itself. And so like the LP or the cassette you're talking about, that's all relatively new. And the book is 500 years old, and I think it finds its own way and its own relevancy in time.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Irma. Thank you.